Hello, welcome back to another episode of Diabetics Doing Things. We're telling the amazing stories of people with diabetes from all over the world. And I'm very excited about this episode. To me, in a way, it's long overdue because there's some awesome members of our community in the diabetes online community who live with a different type of diabetes than type 1 or type 2, and that most of us and most of our guests over the years live with. And our guest today is Maya, and you might know her online as Papayabetic. So, Maya, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are so glad to have you. We really love your account and interacting with you over the years. But also, we wanted to talk a little bit about type 3C diabetes, which we know that you live with, and you get to be the first guest. You don't have to shoulder all of the education, but you get to be the first introduction for our guests on this podcast, at least for what it's like to live with type 3C. So, first of all, like let's talk about you and just a little bit about you and your diagnosis story, and then introduce our guests, our listeners rather, to type 3C diabetes.
Yeah, so I actually just hit my 30-year diaversary like 2 days ago.
Whoa,
So that makes
30-year
yeah,
anniversary, huge.
yeah. Yeah, and then it's also been 20 years that I've been on the Medtronic pump. So that's kinda like 2 huge, like, accomplishments. I didn't think I would get here, honestly. Like, thinking back, I'm like, "Wow, I'm finally 30." So that was just a huge milestone for me. But yeah, no, I'm just excited to talk more about, my journey with diabetes and what exactly type 3C is. But
Well, before we get into that, 20 years on a Medtronic pump. So what was your first Medtronic pump?
oh, I'm terrible with the numbers, but
Yeah, they're hard to remember. There's a lot of them.
yeah, I got on my 10th birthday actually. Just happened to be that case. So that was 2003, obviously. So I know it was a blue pump, a blue or black pump. I don't remember the number though. But it's been great being on the Medtronic pump. I have been able to see the evolution of what it offers throughout the 2 decades. And now with the new 780 coming out, which I need to pre-order, it's been on my calendar.
It's funny, I, like, went to the endocrinologist yesterday just so I made sure that all my stuff was in order so that when I was ready, I could make the upgrade.
And that's so funny you say that because I actually have an endo appointment like couple days before the 15th. So I'm going to make sure all that's lined up. But it's just so awesome. And I actually just went on a CGM not too long ago, like maybe 3 years ago. So that's been a huge transition in itself as well. So it's really exciting to see all the technology changes.
It's funny, like, when you think about it, there's, like, all these kind of I don't know, like, it's such a change to get on CGM, and I think some
Mhm.
people, like myself, were really resistant to it because
Yeah.
you don't want another thing on your body, but then you experience it and you get to see, like, how convenient it is to look at your blood sugar, and something I was doing last month was just trying to, like, be conscious of when I checked my CGM on my pump or my phone, and
Mhm.
how, 6 or 7 years ago for me, that would have meant I would have to prick my finger and, like, check my blood sugar on my glucometer. So, just in those moments, like, remembering how, like, I'm very grateful, and we're very fortunate. Some of us in this country are fortunate enough to be able to get access to CGM. And when we think about, like, the big opportunities across the world, I know Eritrea does a lot of this work in her day job. But, like,
Mhm.
it's, getting people access to CGM is so important because you really do get to unlock, like, what your body does throughout the day. You don't have to guess about it anymore. And it's just really impactful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can totally relate to that because since I graduated college in 2016, I was really struggling trying to find a job that would provide good health insurance. And so I've always worked multiple jobs just in order to survive. And I finally was able to get on with the state, and that has been absolutely amazing. And that's a hard process in itself. But they do provide really good medical coverage. So I have been very fortunate and beyond thankful to work for an employer that does provide access to these medications and devices.
Well, good. I'm so glad to hear that for you. And it's just an important, always thing important to note for people living with chronic illnesses. Like, side hustles sometimes are not, like, optional. You've got to do,
Mhm.
go the extra mile. And I think there's a lot of, like, sort of trauma, like, living behind, people may not even recognize it always, but
Yeah.
you never know when you might need a big out of pocket expense that you can't, negotiate around, that you have to do. And I think that's always kind of hanging over people's heads sometimes. So, props to you for and your employer for offering that great coverage. And I know that's something that we're passionate about at my companies as well. So,
Yeah.
all right, transitioning. You mentioned you just turned 30 and
Yeah.
you had your 30th anniversary. So you were right from the jump, right from day one,
Yes.
thrust and you and your parents thrust into this world of being a full-time pancreas. And for you, that meant even having your pancreas removed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your story as well as just sort of some general awareness about type 3C diabetes.
Yeah, so I've always considered my diversity, obviously my birthday, because within the first 2 hours of life, they diagnosed me with congenital hyperinsulinism, which is a rare genetic medical condition that pretty much the pancreas overproduces insulin. So it creates uncontrollable hypoglycemia. And at the time, they obviously, where I was born, they had no other patients that they've ever experienced this with. So that was a challenge in itself for my parents. And I ended up having my pancreas my pancreatectomy done at UCSF, but it did take about 3 rounds of surgery because they were trying to not do all of it all at once because they were saying like, "Well, if you take out part of it, maybe it'll help." And obviously it didn't. So, I had the final surgery when I was 8 months old. So, you know, back in the early 90s, there was, like, really no technology. So my dad had to be, like, on top of everything, checking my blood sugar every 2 hours. And with hyperinsulinism, um, especially when you're fasting, like, your blood sugars are tanking. So it's, like, trying to figure out how much to give the child in order to sustain the blood sugars. So the way the doctors put it to my parents, diabetes was kinda like the better option because at least you were able to control it more, whereas with HI, it's very uncontrollable. But now with technology and certain medical advancements, it is a little better, but it's still a huge challenge in itself.
Yeah, no kidding. And I just, thinking without a continuous glucose monitor, trying to figure out where you are, from a insulinism standpoint, like
Mhm.
that at that time would just be so difficult, especially with not only like pediatric patient, but like a newborn.
Yeah, and the challenges with HI is that you are susceptible because you're having these extreme low blood sugars, and when I'm talking extreme, I'm talking, like, under 30. So my parents would tell me stories like, "Oh, yeah, you were in the teens," like, just crazy low blood sugars, and so you obviously are susceptible to, like, seizures and other neurological issues that occur from low blood sugars. So children now that are born with it, there is options to get on a CGM, um, but that's still a huge challenge in order to get insurance to kinda cover that because they don't have that diabetes diagnosis.
Right.
And within HI, there's several different like genetic strands. The one that I particularly had, that's why I had to have the pancreatectomy. Most kids with HI can take a medication to help control the blood sugars, or they kind of like outgrow it. So it just really depends. And there's a lot of genetic testing that goes into it, obviously. But at that time, everything was so minimal.
Sure. And I think like that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Even like diabetes is obviously not a rare disease, but just thinking of like how different the diagnosis experience is for someone today, for the most part, compared to somebody 20 years ago, 30 years
Yeah.
ago, is obviously like you see how far we've come, and that is also extended over into more rare diseases like HI, right? So that's great that there's those options out there, but for you, like having to have your pancreas removed, 3 different surgeries before you're 8 months old, like that's a lot of work being done on such a young person.
Yeah. And I don't even know how my parents did it. Like, unfortunately, my mom passed away 5 years ago, but before she passed, she would tell me all the time, like, it was just so hard, but she somehow did it. I don't know what it was, and I give so much props to parents, but especially parents that have a child at that age, like, I don't know how they do it. Like, an infant can't communicate with you, and that's just a whole different ballgame. It's so scary to think about. So
It
shout out to all
is.
those parents.
Man, I think about it all the time. Like they're like having a child is like such a big disruption anyway. And then, you think about having to be a full-time pancreas and then not just for a newborn, but then trying to explain like the nuances of it to a toddler or, a kid who's 5 or 6 years old, and just really can't understand the complexities. Yeah, shout out to, all the parents out there who
Yeah.
are caregivers and, being full-time pancreases for their kids.
Also, what an impossible choice. Like, I'm just thinking of your parents, like, I assume they were maybe younger,
Mhm.
their baby comes out, they're so excited, and, like, they're being told that they now have to make a decision to, like, remove parts of that baby's organs, and it's just, like, that is so hard for me to reconcile in my mind, so I really wonder, like, and it's so sad to hear that you've lost your mom because I wonder, like, how she had to make that decision, and it's like, I am choosing to remove an organ that, yes, is gonna make things better, but now my child is gonna have a chronic lifelong illness, like, what a decision. It's, like, between
Yeah.
a rock and a hard place, like, I can't imagine, so definitely props to them. I
Yeah.
just feel like we can't gloss over that because it's like, I think maybe because it happened to you,
Mhm.
it's like you're used to it, you've lived with that trauma, but, like, hearing
Mhm.
it right now myself, I'm just like, "Oh my god, that is absolutely terrifying."
Yeah. And I've actually been able to connect with the Congenital Hyperinsulinism International Support Group, which I'm so happy to have connected with them. But I've been just hearing all these stories of these young, like you said, young parents having their first child being diagnosed with this. And it's like, that is just so scary. And like, I could never, like, I don't know how to handle it as a parent, even though I have it, like that is just a huge decision to make.
Well, and let's stay on the topic of community as well, because there are a few type 3 Cs that I know in the diabetes online community. And like Jen and Brandon come to mind as two that I am aware of. And, I know that there are others as well. But like, how important is that for you now, like as a creator with your Papayabetic account, like connecting with other people who have like a similar story? Because it's not just diabetes. Like obviously, like we know how important it is, like to connect with people with diabetes and like the impact that it's made for both Eritrea and I individually, both early on in Eritrea's case, going to camp and like having friends with diabetes, and in my case, like making friends on the internet and feeling that sort of like welcome spirit when you're like, "Oh, I don't have to explain this to this person." So talk about what that was like, for you as you're kind of like in the online community and encountering other people who are living with type 3C.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking back. I didn't meet another child like me with diabetes until I was 10 years old, and that's like when I went to camp. So fast forward as an adult, I didn't meet anyone else until I met Jen on the diabetes community. And what's so interesting about type 3C is that like my diagnosis is way different, but every person that I meet with type 3C has a very different diagnosis as well. So I learned so much from them. But it wasn't until I met someone who actually had HI that I was like, wow, this is like a whole other ballgame. Like it is so cool to meet other diabetic and then others that are type 3C, but then someone that actually knows what HI is. I was like, that never happens. Like even my doctors are kind of like, I always joke saying that, oh, the doctors give me like the deer in the headlight look because they've never had a patient like me or they've never heard of the HI medical condition. So like, to have someone actually know what it's like was just I can't even describe that feeling. And a couple months ago, I actually met a family here in Sacramento who had 2 children that were born with HI that now have their pancreases removed, and I was able to chat with them for a couple hours, and it was just I can't describe the feeling, but it was just I felt so happy and understood.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like from this like very difficult thing, there can you can find some thread to pull through, and like, I think when we have those sort of low moments where we're wondering, well, why did this happen to me? And I don't like this, and like there's no end. It's like, life is difficult enough and I have this to deal with. There's those rare moments where you can really connect with someone. And I think like that's really special. I have only, with diabetes, obviously is not as rare. So I get to meet parents and people and friends and peers and some who have become my closest friends with diabetes. But I think I was thinking back to one of my, really close friends' nephew was diagnosed with type 1, and like just getting to go like sit down across the table with him and his mom and his grandma and just be like, "Hey, like it's going to be okay. We can connect on that." And ask questions and like see the lights come on for them. I know that meant so much to that family. So like, that's such a cool thing.
Yeah, and community is amazing, and I think we all need it, because diabetes is so hard and already, but to have someone there that understands it is like so crucial.
It's a huge, huge level up. And, it takes like courage to create the space for yourself and to like raise your hand. So you got your account Papayabetic. And we were talking in our staff meeting, we were calling you Maya Papaya. So I assume that is your nickname. Is that and that's where that came from? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, so My Papaya is my nickname, and when I was creating this account, I asked my boyfriend, like, "What should I call it?" He's like, "Why not Papayabetic? Like, papaya and diabetic." And I'm like, "Oh, I like that. Thank you." And then I kinda just went from there.
and kind of what caused you to take that step? Was that something that you just encountered, or like many people have told their stories of like clicking through hashtags and feeling like wanting to contribute and be a part of the community? What was that like for you?
So, I actually just started my Instagram page because at that time in my life, like, I had just lost my mom and my brother, and I was just going through a lot, like, mentally dealing with 2 losses at such a close time frame. Because I lost them my brother in May, my mom in October the same year, so it was just a lot, and so I was trying to somehow just find an outlet where I can meet others like me, and just have something fun to focus on because it was just too much in real life. And so that's where my Papayabetic came from. I was like, well, I want to meet others that have diabetes. Like, I just want to start talking about it, start creating content. And then I connected with Jen and I met others like me, like other type 3C. So it kind of just took off from there, honestly. And it's been fun. Like, I've been doing this now, I think, for 3 years. So it's been cool.
It is cool, and I love your approach, and also we can talk about like NorCal diabetes, but I don't want to gloss over like sorry to hear for your losses, and I think we talk a lot about grief on this podcast and like how adjacent it is to diabetes and like how much grief there really is involved in diabetes as well. So I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your family, and just sending you guys love for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
And what a beautiful tribute to both of them. Like your mom was there from day one with your
Mhm.
diabetes. And I know my siblings talk about how that it's impacted their life. So I can't imagine how it impacted your brothers. So what a way to completely like, I don't know. It's really meaningful to me, a person who can take grief and turn it into love.
Yeah.
Because what someone said is like, what is grief? But it's from a TV show, but it's like, what is grief but love? Like,
Enduring and
yeah. And like that is just, oof, I'm going to cry. I got to stop.
Yeah. And that's and that's kinda like when I've been able to do these, like, fun, big moments within my platform, I'm like, I just wanna tell my mom so bad because she was so involved in the diabetes community, and I can't, but I obviously tell her in my head and my brother was like they were all such advocates for me, so it's something I can do to keep their memory alive, honestly, for me too, so that's the origin.
well, that's very sweet, and I
Powerful.
know they're proud of you. And for what you're doing for others as well. So speaking of others, and you mentioned that you're in Northern California, like Sacramento. So NorCal Diabetes meetups, like, and I see your account NorCal Diabetes all the time, posting and tagging and being involved in the community. And you guys did a meetup recently. And what's that like to be able to connect with people in your area and be able to see starting this thing and like tangibly be able to interact? We recently had a local event in Dallas, and for us, it's just really cool to, people we don't even see or we wouldn't even expect to be there. We don't really even know. We get to meet them and like, everybody, loves that community connection, but it's always such a surprise to see people where like, wow, we really are reaching these people and there really is an opportunity to get people, offline and in person. So what's that like for you guys?
Oh, I think it's really fun. I'm still in the stages of kinda creating NorCal Diabetes more, like, official, like, learning what it takes to be a nonprofit. So, in the meantime, I've just been doing meetups, but I wanna do so much more, obviously, with that group, but it's been fun. Like, I've been able to connect with some really cool people in SAC. I've also met other people live with diabetes that have the other types like Modi, type 3C, Lotta. It's just been really cool, and with NorCal Diabetes, I then was able to get my second job, which is with DYF, Diabetes Youth Families, and we put on camps in the Northern California area. So recently, I took my NorCal group and I also did something with DYF, and we put on a meetup for children at it's called like Rebounders. It's like a big indoor trampoline place. And that was really fun because I was finally able to connect with parents and just kind of speak with them about camp and just like their overall experiences with diabetes. And just, it kind of brought me back to like when I was a kid, like seeing these kids meet others for the first time, like them, they were just so happy, you know? And it's just a very rewarding experience to be able to bring others together so they can talk about their experiences and make friends too, you know? So I've been able to make some really awesome friends past 2 years since I've been doing this. But also creating meetups, like it's challenging in itself too. You know, like there have been times, and I'm not afraid to admit it, where I put on meetups and no one shows. You know, so it's like, okay, like what can I do differently? Like, what do people want to do? You know, so it's like it's fun, but it's very challenging at the same time.
It is, and it feels risky too. Like
Mhm.
excuse me, we were even doing, wow, I have like the
Oh
Godfather
my
voice over
god,
me.
I
What
love
happened? My
it.
voice is gone.
Batman, your city needs you.
Okay, I'm back. But we even talked about on this podcast of like, it's easy for, to look at like social media numbers or like, endorsements or whatever and like say, oh, well, like, Rob and Diabetic's doing, he's like doing all these things. But we were talking about also like we're just hoping that we could get 6 people at a meetup and
Exactly.
we had 20 and I felt like I could have been king of the world at that point. I was like, oh yes, like we have 20 people here and like we're having a great time and we're just like
Yeah.
having coffee together, but it is risky, like, because you never know, like, people are busy, they have tons of stuff going on, and it's
Yeah.
hard to commit to doing something extra, doing something outside yourself, so,
Yeah.
yeah,
We
that
couldn't
I
even get a
thank you
guy to commit. We couldn't even get the guy to commit, and this is, like, completely like, this is
Yeah.
insider tea, so this you're gonna
Yeah.
get, Maya, but, like, we were there for the meetup, and there was this
Uh-huh.
random guy getting coffee who just was wearing an
Yeah.
Omnipod, so I, like,
Oh,
walked up to him,
funny.
and I was like, "Hey, are you here for the meetup?" And he was like, "No, you crazy weird lady, get away from me,"
Oh
like,
my.
very like, totally had diabetes,
Yeah.
completely uninterested, so I just thought it was funny we couldn't even get a guy who was just randomly there to commit, but 20 other people came, so it was totally
Yeah.
fine. But I will say that fear of, like, putting something on and nobody's gonna come, like, it's like my 5th grade birthday party all over again, like, I sent out the invites, will anyone ever show up? Because 'Cause I'm not cool enough, but, it's
And
different when you work with a celebrity, I guess, I don't know, my
yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, you're really putting yourself out there. I mean, you put yourself out there when you're on social media and in person. Like, I've had friends that have said comments like, "Well, I could never do that. Like, what happens if no one comes? Like, how embarrassing." I'm like, "Well, at least I tried," you know, like, and I mean, like you said, like people have their own lives going on. So it's like, I understand, you know, so, but it's still just a fun experience, even if someone doesn't show, you know?
but I love that though, because I can work, like, for to me, the worst crime is not trying
Hmm.
and talking yourself out of it, and I've talked about this before, but like I have this book sitting in my office and it's my dad got it for me when I was like 6 years old. And it's like this Michael Jordan book and it's like 100 words long. It's like, it's calling it a book. It's just like, it's a lot of pictures in it or whatever, but it's like,
Yeah.
I can't accept not trying. And that's like such a big, like inside my heart, like that exists as like some of my ethos. And so when I hear people say things like that, which I do all the time, like, cause people talk themselves out of doing amazing things because of fear and sometimes like really good reasons. But I think on the other side of that is just so you never know where it's gonna lead you, like having conversations with parents, doing collaborative meetups with kids and camps, like going and jumping around at a trampoline park, like those are experiences that if you don't raise your hand and like give of yourself that vulnerability, you don't get that return. So I think that there really is like so much good stuff on the other side of that if, people can commit and overcome that fear. So props to you for doing that.
Exactly.
It's a big thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
way to commit. Also, like, it just makes me feel like I don't know if Maya you're a super Rob fan or something
Mhm.
because it's very like on theme to something he said a few weeks ago to me, which was, "Are you clocking in at the desk of XYZ and doing the work?" And it really seems like Maya shows up at Papayabetic every day and puts in the time. And I think that's beautiful because if people are looking like there's a community right there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Aw, thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk just a little bit about like what would you say to someone who is having those thoughts like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I want to have this community or I want to be part of a
Mhm.
meetup or I want to like start do something in my community like what
Yeah.
Maya is doing." But they haven't worked up the courage yet. Like what would you say to somebody like that?
And it's funny you mentioned that because I have had people ask me that, like on TikTok especially. And I just say, like, just go for it. Like, like, I know I wish there was a better answer, but it's like, if you have an idea that you want to bring people together, really just start talking about it on social media, especially the first one. Give it like a couple weeks, like just really market yourself and what you want to do and hope for the best. Like hopefully that people will come. But the tricky part is too is finding venues that don't charge you a lot of money. And I get it. They're a business. They have to do what they have to do. But I think especially in the beginning, I was like, I don't know if I can fork out like 100 and something dollars just to reserve a table, like I don't even know if anyone's coming. So I always tell people that are interested in that, just like find somewhere where you can reserve a table for free for just a couple people, really talk about it on social media and just go for it, because you'll never know who will come. And everyone's nervous. Like the first one I did, the awesome ladies that came, they're like, "We were so nervous to come, but I'm so glad that we did." And we talked there for like 3 hours, and it was just a good time. And so, yeah, just go for it if you're interested in doing a meetup.
Yeah, I love it. I when I used to go to events and speak more often, and some of those are coming back, but I used to tell people like the word meetup, sometimes it's just like people meeting at a restaurant or it's meeting at a coffee shop or meeting at a bar or, a bowling alley or something where, a couple people would just meet or friends would go anyway. So just be the
Yeah.
meetup you want to see in the world and just, put that out there. And sometimes, again, the word meetup, you'll see photos, everybody looks like they're having a great time. And I think that can be intimidating for some people. But
Mhm.
really, it's just like 5 or 6 people most of the time, just sitting around talking, having a good time, and just overcoming their fear, getting outside themselves and being willing to show up for each other, which I think also has a ton of power. So
Exactly.
here I am, big meetup guy, big advocate for meetups.
Yes, and I think also it depends on location. Like, obviously, you're in your area, there's a lot more people. Sacramento is like, even though we're the capital of California, it's not an easy place for everyone to meet. Everyone's kind of spread out? So that's like a tricky part too. Like if I was in San Francisco or LA, I think it would be a lot easier. But that's just me personally thinking that.
You might just have to light the beam, and just tell
Yes,
people where to
light the
go.
beam, yeah.
So I want to ask you a question, regarding a little bit of you talked about your Medtronic pump and you've been on a
Mhm,
pump for 20 years.
mhm,
And something that I learned in the last year about type 3C diabetes is
mhm,
that because it's not diabetes mellitus technically, like even though the symptoms are the same. And I think where I learned this was I was on a speaker committee trying to approve speakers for a conference.
mhm,
And there was a person who had submitted a request and they lived with type 3C. And unfortunately, like there was this big discussion about how they couldn't technically approve them as a speaker because they didn't have diabetes mellitus.
mhm,
And to me, I thought that the story was the more important thing, and like this, like they weren't giving any, treatment options or anything like that. It was more of just inspirational.
yeah.
But there are challenges, and I want to know, like for you, maybe with insurance approvals or endocrinologists, or even working with brands, have you run into any issues, like because you live with type 3C, and technically that's not, even though your treatment is the same as, mostly the same as a person with type 1,
Mhm,
uh, technically on paper there is a difference.
yeah. So I have noticed that too, and I feel like, yeah, it's a tricky one because we put type 1 on insurance because that's the only way things are gonna be paid, honestly. But, like, my doctors they're like, "No, like, you're pancreatic, your diabetes is secondary, like, it's a surgical induced diabetes," like, so it is tricky because, like, when I introduce myself to people, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I have I just say diabetes. I don't even
Yeah.
say the type. They'll ask me, "Oh, are you type 1?" I'm like, "Not really, like, I handle it like I'm insulin dependent," I say that, "but I have my pancreas removed." And they're like, "What?" Like, "Never heard of that?" Um, so it does get tricky, and so that's why, especially with, like, devices or in just insurance, we have to put, like, type 1 even though I don't have type 1? So it is a very tricky thing, but I think including all the different types of diabetes, especially in conferences, like speaking engagements, like I think that's important because I think we can all learn from one another. And diabetes is at the end of the day, we all go through the same thing. We like, we may just have different diagnoses, but we're all dealing with the same types of stresses and issues, especially with medical stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I think like the knowledge that I gained from learning from other people with different types of diabetes. You mentioned earlier, like Modi and Lada. We haven't had anyone with Modi on the podcast before, and that's a miss. We got it on the list to do later this spring. But yeah, just learning about Lada and learning about people who are misdiagnosed type 2 who really have Lada and go through that journey. Like how many times have we heard that in the community? And if you're not plugged in, you may have never heard of that before. Um,
Exactly.
and like you said, like, on some forms, there's probably not type 3C, it's just
Mhm.
diabetes, and I think too, like, I often, just to try to be more respectful and inclusive of people with type 2, also introduce myself as just having diabetes. If
Mhm.
they wanna get into the nitty-gritty, we can, but most people just are like, "Oh, okay, cool, yeah, I take," and then the next one is usually, "Whoa, well, what do you take?" And it's like, "Yeah, well, I take insulin." So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's really interesting. I think to me, like, inclusion is such a huge it's kind of a buzzword right now, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of, like, companies, like, whether it's, you know, race and gender or cultural background, but diabetes is inclusive of that, and I think in the diabetes community, it's really easy to like, we're really good about saying diabetes is not a monolith, but
Mhm.
it's when you put it into practice and you see like there are real hurdles to just getting the care that you need, even
Yeah.
if you check all the other boxes like, insurance and coverage and access to, the right people to get you the devices that you need, you can still encounter these problems and,
Mhm.
switching healthcare providers, like you said, like different distinctions, like surgically induced diabetes. It's like at the end of the day, you're still required to take insulin. You're still required, to treat and count every carb.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the
So
loophole. That's the loophole, right? That's why your providers have been able to do it. Is because you are insulin dependent, right? So that's
Mhm.
why we're like, oh, we'll just list you as type one. Which
Yeah.
makes that's pretty smart. It's kind of genius, on there. And like,
Yeah.
how do we still get her what she needs?
Yeah, and then because I have my pancreas removal, then I obviously have to take the digestive enzymes. So that's like kinda it's tricky and it's up to you because my endo can prescribe them, but I really should be seeing a gastroenterologist for it. But a lot of the gastros have never seen a patient like me as they claim also. So it's just that issue with that medication is a whole other discussion?
I was
And
wondering what those implications were because I know that the full removal of the pancreas is insulin and digestive enzymes. So I was just like, so what does that diagnosis look like?
yeah, so I mean, I have to take the name brand that I use is Creon. There is another brand, and I'm kind of going through some difficulty with that medication as we speak because my endo noticed, my absorption is horrible in general because I don't, create those enzymes naturally. I have to, take them orally. And so obviously it causes all these issues with my blood sugars where I experience really bad roller coaster effects. Like sometimes I'll be like close to 300 and drop down to like 40. Like just insulin is, I'm so sensitive to insulin. I've never really experienced that insulin resistance. And certain foods will obviously, we already know that certain foods cause issues with our blood sugars, but because even though I'm taking the Creon, sometimes I feel like it's like I never took it because my body's then starts to freak out because it can't absorb and it can't digest. But Creon, you need to have good coverage for it because that medication is more expensive than insulin,
mhm.
like a lot more, like very, very, very expensive. And there are some programs that help with the cost, but it's just ridiculous, like how much that medication really is out of pocket. And we obviously need both, because I need to eat. And so right now I'm trying to figure out if I'm already in the highest dosage of Creon, but I need to see if kind of like a gastro that can help me figure out why I'm having so many digestion issues, you know, and I've done all the tests. There's no celiac, no nothing, but it's really impacting my blood sugars at this point, the last like year or two.
It's also so interesting to see how your body changes over time, and your dosages change or your body assimilates and adapts to the medication. You either have to take more or take something different. Yeah, well, I hate knowing how frustrating roller coaster blood sugars are. Man, I absolutely feel tons of just sympathy for you having to go through that, and also then having to figure out the brand name or the generic and like all of that. Like,
Mhm.
and that's another thing that we didn't even really talk about is outside of being insulin dependent and having to you basically live with the treatment of type 1 diabetes, you not only you have other challenges as well. So what does
Mhm.
your typical kind of like medication and treatment plan look like?
Well, I obviously take the insulin and the Creon anytime I eat or eat snacks, but I feel like, and this is gonna sound so weird to say, but I feel like the blood handling the blood sugars is not my biggest difficulty. It's just the digestion, like, and just eating, because there's a lot of foods that I feel like I can't eat because they give me like horrible symptoms, and it's just like the constant like fatigue of like feeling sick from my stomach, And recently I went to the Children with Diabetes conference, the regional in Seattle, and I was talking to the director there, and he was familiar with my diabetes, was like, "Oh, this is so cool," And he recommended some things that I should look into. So I'm like, "Oh, I'll definitely check that out with my endo next time," because he's seen others that have that, like me, obviously, that have complained about the same things. So I think I need to like see like a subspecialist, And I've also spoken to other people within the HI community that have experienced the same thing. So I'm kind of just seeing what my options are, but it's gonna be it's gonna be kind of tricky, honestly.
Well, and it's kind of like just when you get a good piece of information, it means,
Mhm.
oh, I've got to go make another appointment with another specialist and like go through
Yeah,
those hurdles, just to get through that, which is
yeah,
just such a challenge.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of just crazy. I don't think a lot of times people realize how much the pancreas actually does for us. Like obviously insulin's a big thing, but like I know that a lot there's and I mean, there's a lot of people and a lot of people that don't, but some people use the term dead pancreas, in the community. And I kind of chuckle when I hear that word because I'm like, your pancreas really isn't dead. Just because you stop making insulin, you have no idea how much that organ's actually helping with your digestive system. And like when you don't have that, like, oh my God, like it just kind of sucks, like the digestion and dealing with the blood sugars and insulin. So that's why I just try to stay away from using that term or using other words like lazy pancreas or whatever, just because that organ is so important.
I love that you're talking about this. I was waiting. This is tea. That's what we were just saying because I feel like there's a whole group called Dead Pancreas Gang. I think there's like a
Mhm.
T-shirt. Maybe I'm sorry
Yeah.
if there's a podcast and that's y'all, my bad. But that is a lame name. Like people who are actually impacted by that, like who full on like you have no pancreas, right? And it's like you are just pretending that this other people are just pretending this organ is dead in their body when like it actually does all this stuff for them. Like how privileged of us, you know? And I don't
Well,
think we're even thinking about that. It's that I love this stuff because it's the othering of others, right? Like,
Mhm.
and Rob and I talk about this a lot, but it's like we play oppression Olympics in
Mhm.
disabled communities. And like,
Yeah.
gosh, I until I found your account, it never even crossed my mind that we were othering people with type 3C. Like, how
so
awful
so I that hit the nail on the head because it didn't cross your mind because you didn't know.
at
So
all.
I've seen the Dead Pancreas Gang sweatshirts. I've seen the sweatshirt, other sweatshirts that and t-shirts that people have had challenges with. And
Yeah.
I do feel a little I wanna be gentle to my creatives because I know people are like
Yeah.
they
Same. Same.
mean
Yeah.
well. They mean
Yeah. Yeah.
well, and they're trying something new, and they're doing something in a space that, like, nobody does cool stuff for, so keep doing cool shit.
Hmm.
But also, just remember that, like, we're all learning so much about diabetes and it really is a spectrum. Like, your first 10 years, you learn, enough, and then you start to weasel your way into other communities and meet other people, and hopefully you're sharing your story, and that allows you to meet other people that change your perspective and make
Yeah.
you realize, like, "Oh, like, my pancreas really does do some things for me that if I didn't have it, or if I had pancreatitis, like,
Hmm.
I would have tons more problems." And so I think, like, while we do sometimes are guilty of playing oppression Olympics, and especially on social media where we're trying to like be seen and we're trying to be heard and we're trying to be validated, we can do better to remember like to be gentle with each other on both sides where it's like, hey, like, that's an opportunity to educate.
Hmm.
There's so much stigma in the world of diabetes, like 50 years of Wilford Brimley's type 2 diabetes commercials. Rest in peace, Wilford Brimley, my guy.
Yeah.
But like there's just a lot of work that we've got to undo, and it takes one person at a time. So
Yeah.
because we have Papayabetic, because we have Jen has diabetes, because we have the other folks who are out sharing their stories, we now know that there's, your pancreas, well, my pancreas is not dead.
Yeah.
It's lazy and worth a shit, but it's not dead. It's still there helping me out.
Yeah.
I
And
think
yeah.
it would be worth to people like Maya. So I guess this is my question, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
other than the digestive enzymes and the insulin, what else do people with diabetes need to know that the pancreas does for them that maybe does not happen in a type 3C body at all?
I know there's other things, but I can't, like, name them off the top of my head right now,
No
honestly,
worries.
but, those are just the 2 that really come to mind. So, obviously, the digestion and the insulin producing. And kinda, like, to go back to, like, the whole statement that pancreas thing, the way I mean, and there's no hate to anyone, at all. It's just, like, to me, it's just I take it as a time to educate because, like, how most people with diabetes don't like it when we say, "Oh, diabetes is caused by eating too much sugar." I don't really like it when people say dead pancreas because it's like your pancreas really isn't dead, like so it's just a time to educate, and I think we can all learn from one another because diabetes is just so complex.
Gosh, the more I learn about it, the more that rings true. It's
This
just
is
it's so true. Like there's so many different things. Like it's been now 5+ years since I had a researcher come on the podcast and talk about in the research community, diabetes is known as the disease with too many inputs because
Yeah.
there's so many different things that affect it. And 80% of them you don't even have control over. So, are you having a bad blood sugar day because of diabetes or because of the 90 other things that could potentially be going wrong?
Yeah.
Because somebody said something mean to you or because, you a doorknob snatched off your sight or what are one of the infinite other challenges that could be going through it. And then you add another complexity like losing your pancreas as part of that. Then there's other things to overcome. And, all
Yeah.
of those things play into each other. And it is complex. And, anybody who's dealing with it or anybody who's taking care of someone who's encountering whether it's type 1, type 2, type 3 Modi, Lada, or others, and we don't even know like the other distinctions underneath those yet. Like there could be 40 types of diabetes, and we just don't even know yet because we're
Yeah.
encountering so much new research every single day.
Exactly. And then, like, when I think of when I was recently talking to a doctor from I was at a conference also for HI, and I asked them, like, "Okay, obviously, like, at some point, I probably will be thinking about having kids, like, how does this affect me?" And he said, "Well, you're gonna have to get genetically tested to see if you carry the gene because it's a 50-50 chance. So, you either have it and you have to figure out, like, if you do have children, like, are you gonna pass on that gene? You have to get your partner to get tested too. It's like a whole thing. So it just brings on a whole other can of worms, honestly, I feel like.
Well, and like what a normal thing to ask,
Mhm. Yeah.
I think again back to the unintended consequences of trying to be positive. Like you can do anything with diabetes line. While
Mhm.
true in some cases, like, is not true for everybody, and, that doesn't mean that there aren't gonna be extra complications or extra challenges or questions that you have to ask that are really difficult, when you're doing things like starting a family, which somebody who's more able-bodied might just take for granted.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
I think about that a lot, and maybe this is a little bit off course, but it's just like,
Mhm.
maybe Maya, I don't know if you have these frustrations, but gosh, sometimes I dislike healthy people so much. And I can't imagine thinking of like planning a future family and being like,
Mhm.
now I have to consider if I'm going to pass this gene on. So what a implication as a woman, right? And so I guess I wonder if there's other implications also as a woman with type 3C, like if there's anything else that you have to deal with maybe on a monthly basis or whatever.
Yeah, I can't think of anything right now, honestly. It's just yeah, but it's scary to think about, like, I have to make such a big decision if I do wanna start kids, like, I have to get tested, I have to get, my husband does like, all that. It's just but yeah, I agree, like, I think I get jealous more so, like, when people can actually just eat food and enjoy it and not have issues eating it, like, yeah, like, they don't have to give insulin, but they don't have to think, "Is this food gonna actually hurt them?" And they have a terrible stomachache for the next couple hours or days, like, I get jealous of people that can eat food normally.
Yeah,
Like,
I relate.
foodie, no,
Absolutely.
foodie, like, I love food, so
You guys know what I do to healthy people?
What,
I
Rob?
cook them on the basketball court on a weekly basis.
I love
That's
it.
my therapy. I'm just like, you don't know this, but I have this insulin pump and the CGM on my arm, and when I go home later, my blood sugar is gonna fall low when I sit on the couch. But I'm gonna get you now. That's my personal.
It's very much like I am disabled and yet I am better than you, healthy person. Jeez Louise, Rob.
It's bad.
Will the superior complex ever die? But that's a conversation for a different pod.
How much time do we have for this part? Maya, this has been awesome. I messaged Eritrea on the side. I just said, "Good pod. This is
This
excellent
has been
podcast."
fun. Thank you
And
so much.
thank you for being so willing to share and educate us as well as our listeners on what life is like for someone whose pancreas has been removed and lives with type 3C diabetes. I've learned a lot, and I just am so inspired by you being willing not only to get up every day and do the work to make yourself like live and eat and all of the math and all of the challenges that come with that, but then also to give of yourself and to connect with others and be part of the community and talk to family members. I know, uh, not to, I don't know, this is, I'm feeling emotional even just bringing it up, but I know that your family, just knowing that you can pay it forward to someone else. I know that if they could have met a Papayabetic when you were born, that would have really helped them. And so props to you for paying that forward. And I know you're making a huge impact in people's lives.
Oh, thank you. That's sweet.
Oh, cool. So we've talked about Papayabetic.
Yeah.
We've talked about NorCal Diabetes. If
Yeah.
you're listening to this and you're in NorCal, you got to follow that account. You got to get linked up. And yeah, we would love to do some more stuff with you as well. So
Definitely.
we'll keep an eye out. And so please link us up if you need us to promote any meetups or things like that, or
Yeah.
send something out in the newsletter. We would love to help support.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, have a good day, guys.